Aloha mai kako, and today we're bringing you Midday Mana'o straight from the 21st Annual Native Hawaiian Convention. Please sit back and enjoy one of the most intense conversations that we've hosted at this year's convention, one that means a lot for us because it has to do with the health of our fresh water here in Hawaii. Sit back and enjoy this panel on Kapūkakī, Red Hill.
Ola I ka wai o kanaloa e ola. Ola I ka wai o ku'uaina e ola. Ola I ka wai no Naka e ola, e ola, e ola, e ola I ka wai o kanaloa e ola. Ola I ka wai o ku'uaina e ola. Ola I ka wai no Naka e ola, e ola, e ola, e ola I ka wai o kanaloa e ola. Ola I ka wai o ku'uaina e ola. Ola I ka wai no Naka e ola, e ola, e ola, e ola I ka wai o kanaloa e ola. Ola I ka wai o ku'uaina e ola. Ola I ka wai no Naka e ola, e ola, e ola, e aloha e aloha e aloha e. Ola, 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 ola I ka wai. Mahalo a nui. I keia, ko kākou hui ana, no neia maula o ka haahahala wai nui. E like no me ka kākou I lohe ai. Puana ia, neia o lelo o aloha. O ka waihona aloha, aia no I loko ka Nā'alehu. Ke kahi manawa, huki huki nā kuleana like ole, nā mea like ole. Koe no nae, ko kākou kupa'a, mai ia mea o ke aloha. Ke aloha oi aku, ma luna o nā mea pau. Ladies and gentlemen, to bring the real introducer of this next panel of distinguished guests and speakers, I invoke this sense of aloha within each and every one of us, that we rise together to hear the words that have been brought here today by those whom will utter them. And may we offer our aloha as we partake of this next session.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for Kumuhina for that. You know, everyone, this issue of Kapūkakī and the Red Hill water crisis is garnered national, international attention, as well as local media attention, and it has been heavily on our hearts and minds for years, really heavily in the last couple of months. But as Kumuhina was saying, we really want to open up this healthy conversation, a safe space. We have an incredible panel here to discuss this topic with all of us. And to really navigate this discussion is going to be Mr. Nā'alehu Anthony. He's a graduate of Kamehameha Schools, Nā'alehu is an advocate and storyteller from Ka'a'awa Oahu. Across his many roles in our important community, including co-founder of Oiwi TV, longtime Hokule'a crew member, director of COVID Po, principal of Pilina First, and as of 2021, Board of Water Supply board member. Nā'alehu engages complicated issues to center the interests of the community in the conversations and decisions that will impact the future trajectory of this place. Please, everyone, join me in introducing our moderator, Lehu. You do so many jobs. Everybody, Nā'alehu Anthony.
Okay, aloha nui kākou. Oh, come on, you guys. Aloha nui kākou. So it was brought to my attention today that this is actually the first time that the members of this community have come together in this way, representing the Sierra Club, the Board of Water Supply, the Department of Health, and the Navy. And so how about a huge round of applause for the fact that everybody would come out tonight, today. And you know, what's so amazing to see all of you back live in real person and not on a Zoom screen is that there are just so many of us who have come to celebrate things Hawaii, to be in space together, and to work towards a lot of the challenges that this community faces. And without CNHA and Kuhio Lewis at the lead and his staff, this would not be possible. So how about a huge round of applause? These guys have been working tirelessly for weeks putting this together. You know, Kuhio said something yesterday that really struck me. If you recall, when he was up here at the podium, he was talking about how he was sitting in one of those seats many years ago, and he never, ever thought that he would be in the position of running this organization, and that probably the next CEO of CNHA is somewhere in the stands. And what's so important about that is this gift that this organization gives to the youth. That an open day at the top, there have been any number of sponsorships for the youth to come out and engage. And just want to give a special shout out to the Kinaeha boys out there in the back from Kailua. That's my workout crew during the week. The fact that they're here, the fact that they took the time to come here, I really, really appreciate that. And today's for having conversations that are not only timely, but really important for our community to hear. It's really important that we're here in person to have a pointed and respectful discussion as a community. We have an hour today, maybe just a few minutes less than an hour, and at about the 45-minute mark, we'll open up for questions. And so the way that we want to do this is CNHA staff are coming around with cards and pens, and they're going to collate the questions, and then they're going to bring them up to me at about the 45-minute mark, and then we'll break from the questions that I have, and we'll go into questions from the community. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to do a quick intro of where we are with respect to Red Hill. In May of last year, roughly 20,000 gallons of jet fuel were spilled at the Navy's Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. After the cleanup, many thousands of gallons remained unaccounted for. In November of 2021, an accident at the facility ruptured a pipe that had been holding those missing gallons of fuel from May, and roughly 5,000 gallons of that fuel contaminated our aquifer, the primary source of water for Honolulu. Thousands of families on the Navy water system were sickened and displaced from their homes for months. Our drinking water has been deemed safe, and we are now turning to the fact that there is still fuel in the aquifer, and that bodies of water, as a rule, are not static. We don't know exactly how much fuel remains in the water and in the rock, and we don't know if or how fast it is moving through the aquifer. The Secretary of Defense has committed the Navy to defueling the Red Hill facility. In the meantime, over 100 million gallons of fuel remain in the aging tanks situated 100 feet above the aquifer. The Navy's well at Red Hill Shaft remains shut down, as does the Board of Water Supply's Aiea and Halawa wells, to prevent the accidental distribution of fuel-contaminated water being served to our residents. There have been and continue to be many important discussions about how we got to this point, the most recent of which was a special Senate hearing Tuesday of this week. I encourage you all to watch it if you haven't already on the Senate YouTube channel. Our conversation today will instead look at the future of this issue in three key areas. First, defueling, what needs to be done, how it will be accomplished, and accomplished with a sense of urgency. Second, remediation, how will Oahu's source of pure, clean drinking water be restored? And third, the future of our aquifer. Will there be enough water for our community into the future? Before we get to introducing our panelists, I want to ask a few questions of you. By show of hands, how many of you were directly or indirectly impacted by what happened at Red Hill? Thank you. By show of hands, how many of you have had your trust in the US military affected by this situation? Thank you. And finally, by show of hands, how many of you are concerned about the long-term effects of this crisis on our drinking water in the future? Thank you very much. Wayne, I'm going to start with you, and I'd like you to tell us what organization you're from and what role you have and your organization has in this crisis.
Aloha mai kākou. Ova Wayne Waiolama Chung Tanaka, ka luna ho'oko o Sierra Club of Hawaii. Nui ko'u aloha no Hawaii ne, ku'u aina hana. No laila, mahalo nui e Nā'alehu, ame Anakawa Ernie, ame ka luna ho'oko DOH-EHA, ame Sineche, no kea kama iliu ana, e pili ana I Kapūkakī, ame ka waiola o Oahu alua. E ole ka wai. So, in a nutshell, I think the role of the Sierra Club of Hawaii really has been, for a number of years now, to uncover the truth, and to tell the truth, and to do what it takes to cleanse Kapūkakī of this 80-year-old existential threat to literally the foundation of life on this island. This resource that has always provided for life and the people on Oahu as well, and that will continue to provide for not just ourselves, but for our future generations. And so that includes things like filing our lawsuit in 2017 to get the state to uphold its own laws that require facilities like including the Red Hill facility to be regulated. It includes challenging the Navy's permits, includes intervening, or permit application, sorry, to continue operating this facility, intervening in the Department of Health's emergency order to make sure that they stand their ground and don't compromise when they finally came around and said, you have to defuel this facility. And then also, too, taking all of the evidence, all of the information that we've gathered through those processes and then sharing it with the community and helping folks organize, because really this, when Nā'alehu asks, who has been indirectly affected or directly affected, it's all of us. All of us have been affected and are at risk for even worse outcomes if we allow this situation to persist. So mahalo.
Ernie Lau, Chief Engineer for the Board of Water Supply.
Aloha, everybody. As I'm sitting here, I see at the stage on either side Kalo, and I just had the great honor to plant my first huli in my yard. It's still alive. But for the kalo to grow, it takes water. It takes vai. And clean water to make it grow healthy and strong to provide food for us. This red hail situation has been a disappointment for the last 8 years. But I just take encouragement from Chair Lindsay's, her speech, and how she said that we have to work together. So right now, folks, and I really, really appreciate all the support from the Kanaka Maoli throughout the state of Hawaii that has made a difference on this issue, that has brought the Navy to a decision to actually defuel and close the facility. Mahalo. But the way forward right now, because I fear our precious, irreplaceable groundwater aquifer, the precious vai, is contaminated. We just don't know how much and where it's maybe moving, that we have to be able to pull together as a community. And all of us here on this stage will have to find a way to work together for the good of our people, for the good of the vai, to protect it, to clean it up, to empty out the fuel as soon as possible from that facility. It is not going to be easy. And please, all of you, don't give up though, because we will get through this, and we can only do it together. And we have to keep the pressure on all of us to make sure that we carry out for our future, for our children, for generations to come, and as like some would say, for 7 generations to come, that we need to protect this vai and to get this problem resolved. But I just want to let you know too, there are still chapters to be written in this story, and I'm afraid that I can't tell you that the chapters will contain good stories. There may be some sad news in these chapters to be written, but let us not give up hope, because we need to get through this for the good of our community. 400,000 people in Honolulu depend on this aquifer and the aquifer in Honolulu. And there are 20,000 people that live in the Aia Halawa community that depend on the aquifer also. So we need to not give up. We need to continue to push forward and not be satisfied until it is done. So I met Admiral Barnett just a few minutes ago, and it was really nice to get to meet him and to know his history and where he's from, his roots, and to get to know him personally. That's going to be very important. But Admiral Barnett, if you can carry back the message to the military, to the Pentagon, to the Secretary of Defense, please assign people that will be responsible for the defueling and the closure of the facility, that will not leave every 2 or 3 years, that they will be assigned to that task until it is done, until it is POW. We cannot allow leadership to change every 2 or 3 years. They need to be held accountable, and they need to be on this until POW. Mahalo.
Kathy Ho from the Department of Health.
Aloha. My name is Kathy Ho. I'm the Deputy Director for Environmental Health. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel today. And as I was thinking about our discussion today, two things came to mind. First, I'm sitting here today, but behind me and back in the office is a team of dedicated DOH employees who have worked tirelessly from the beginning of this humanitarian and environmental crisis. And for that, I want to thank them for their dedication. The second thing I wanted to, which brought to mind, was many years ago, I was at a conference on the mainland with members of the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana and the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission. Together, we worked to secure the Navy's commitment to begin the process of cleaning up, restoration, and bringing Kaho'olawe back to a healthy place. I want to assure everyone here today that I am committed with that same urgency and that same commitment that I had oh so many years ago to Kaho'olawe. I have that same commitment to the defueling and decommissioning of Red Hill. DOH commits to that. But we cannot forget the aquifer. I am many generations, 5 generations, born and raised on the Leeward Coast. I recognize that this aquifer is important to our future generations. I'd like to see it cleaned up, remediated, so that we can have this aquifer used for many, many generations to come. Thank you.
Rear Admiral Stephen Barnett.
Aloha. I want to say it's humbling to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate this beautiful lei. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate you welcoming me. As you, I wrote down my remarks because I didn't really want to miss anything, and it won't take long. As you know, my name is Steve Barnett. It's an honor to be here with you, to listen to you, to also to discuss these important and tough issues, and just as we've said here, to collaborate on the way ahead. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Tennessee, a town called Columbia, Tennessee. You can probably hear it in my voice. Folks say I have a southern accent sometimes and it comes out. So for that, I'm sorry. I'm the son of a teacher and a factory worker, and I'm also the husband of a psychiatrist. So I got a lot going on. My wife and children and I have moved around the country many, many times. We're blessed to be back here on island. This is my second time. My daughter went to school. She's currently in law school right now, but she went to St. Anthony's in Kailua. My son is a former, recently married former college football player, recently married. We have no grandkids right now. I do have grandpups, but we're waiting on grandkids. As I mentioned, this is my second time here, and for the second time, I've brought my in-laws back with me. They love this place just like we do. It's like home. I know many of us probably have some of our elders in our homes with us, and one thing that I'm learning from my elders is patience. Yesterday in a meeting, I received a text from my wife and it said one thing, it was patience. So I'm looking forward to bringing that patience here to work through this process. We, and I want to say me and my family, we have a deep respect and admiration for the Hawaiian people, the culture, the history, and the spectacular nature of these islands. While I've only been in the job for 35 days, I'm here with you because I need to listen and learn. Steve Barnett is here to listen and to learn. I'm committed to moving forward. I want each and every one of you to know that I'm committed to moving forward uncompromisingly on our mission to protect the water, the environment, and just as importantly, our community. The Navy. The Navy takes full responsibility for what happens. Everyone in this room, on this stage, has a right to be angry. We not only disrupted many lives and many livelihoods, we failed. We failed in our solemn duty to protect the island's most precious resource and her people. But we will get it right. As mentioned earlier, the Secretary of Defense and many other senior leaders have said that, and they mean it. We are absolutely committed to solving this crisis, and I'm committed to getting it right. You know, I've been following the incident here at Red Hill for a while. I was previously the Admiral in Navy Region Southwest, which is in San Diego. And before I knew I would be coming here, I sent some of my personal staff members out to assist in fixing what was going on. I sent a lot of my people. But why did I do that? Because when friends need help, you send help. One thing that I believe in, and I've taken this is my third region that I've commanded, is environmental equity. That's been a cornerstone of my 2 previous jobs, and it would be a cornerstone here. As I get to my role here, and I want to explain that to you, my role here is the executive agent. So what does that mean? That means that I'm responsible for exercising control and oversight over all things Red Hill. I oversee all the commands that work there, and I'm here to ensure concise and clear communications, operations, maintenance, emergency response, safety, and engineering. My mission is as quickly as safely possible to defuel Red Hill, and I will be part of that. We will continue to work with our regulators and our partners here on stage. I know I've submitted the initial defueling plan, and it's a framework. I've got work to do. The Navy has work to do. We owe some supplemental information and feedback to the Department of Health and to the EPA. Make no mistake about it. I got it, and we're working it. Lastly, I want to tell you that the Secretary of Defense has made a task force. So what does that mean? He has assigned a senior Navy admiral that is going to come here and work strictly on this task. It will be his or her sole job. They will be here on island. They will also bring a staff, and this staff will be made up from people, civilian and military, from across DOD. I will integrate with my team into that staff, so the lessons and things that we've been doing will not be lost. I will be part of that task force. Lastly, I want to emphasize that I remain personally grateful for the continued guidance, feedback, and support that I've received from the stakeholders, the regulators, federal, congressional, state individuals, and members of the Native Hawaiian community. I appreciate it. We understand how vitally important these relationships and, more importantly, the friendships are as we move towards solving this crisis and rebuilding the trust that we've lost. I look forward to listening and learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne, the first question goes to you. Given the current understanding of the crisis at Red Hill, where does this environmental disaster stand in terms of ranking with other disasters relative to the historic or potential environmental threats facing these islands? Where are we with this issue, and where does it rank?
That's a good question. Thank you, Nā'alehu. You know, I won't name names, but at one point in this crisis, someone once said to justify his reluctance to agree with the shutting down of Red Hill. He said something about the military being a vibrant part of our economy. And I thought, you know, how, ignoring the disconnects with all of that, but I thought how selfish of a perspective that was to be willing to accept, you know, this unsustainable economic dependency in exchange for the future of our children and our grandchildren and the life of this island, you know, for decades. Because there's, you know, as Nā'alehu said, there's over 100 million gallons of fuel still in Kapūkakī, still 100 feet above our groundwater aquifer. Just 1% of that fuel would be enough to contaminate more water than we use in decades on this island. So the threat is real. I'm really worried. This is a huge issue. This is an existential issue. This is a fight of our generation. Facilities always leaked fuel. Since the 40s, it's been leaking fuel. It's been poisoning. It's been threatening to poison the lifeblood of this island in its entire existence for generations. And we really have to be the generation. We have no choice. We cannot stand by and watch our island die. And so yeah, so this is quite possibly one of the biggest crises that we've faced.
Kathy?
Yeah, Nā'alehu, I'd just like to add something to that. I'm a environmental lawyer by trade, and I chose this because I wanted to protect the environment. And part of it was because I had learned from the lessons of PKO and Greenpeace and Save the Whales and Protect Ka'iwi Coastline, all of that imprinted on me. But I was with the Attorney Generals for many decades. When I left, I thought, I was cleaning out my office and I thought, I had been involved in so many really impactful cases. But Kaho'olawe was always one that was not only impactful to me spiritually, because I'd been to the island several times, and it is truly a spiritual island, but it also rallied the people. It was the rallying call for the people of Hawaii to do something. And I think that was the beginning for us. Now I'm looking at Red Hill, and Red Hill Act to me is equally, if not more important to Kaho'olawe. It has that same impact. We, the people, can bring our voices together and we can effect change, not only for this generation, for my generation, but for future generations. That's why I do my job, is because I'm worried about future generations. Thank you.
Kathy, the Department of Health, I think last week, rejected the defueling plan for Red Hill. Can you talk a little bit about what was unacceptable about it and what the Department of Health needs to see in a defueling plan from the Navy?
Yeah, so, we issued an emergency order, and in the emergency order, we asked that there were a minimum of 7 elements that needed to be addressed in the defueling plan. So we were highly anticipating the defueling plan, which we received on June 30th. Unfortunately, the defueling plan was lacking in so many ways. Details, it was lacking in timelines, and importantly, it was lacking in those 7 elements that we had addressed. I mean, this isn't really of any surprise to the Navy, because they themselves in the plan said that they knew the Department of Health was not going to accept the defueling plan. But I would also like to see a spill prevention plan, a operations plan in the defueling plan. We will reject it. We haven't yet. We are working on our comments. We should submit those sometime, I'm hoping this week, that will set forth in detail the kind of information we need. And what I'm really hoping is that the next iteration of this defueling plan will be something that the department can accept, so that we can move forward with the actual defueling and unpacking of the lines.
Admiral Barnett, the question for you is a follow-up to Kathy's comments. And the question is, why are we looking at a 2-year defueling process if the Red Hill facility was an active fuel depot through November of last year?
Thank you, sir. That's a great question. what I will tell you is that I acknowledge your response, ma'am. I do know that we have items to get to you. We are working those items, and we are turning on those, and I will make sure that we get you those, ma'am. Regarding the timeline, I understand that the timeline, obviously, we want to get it out as quickly as possible, it being the fuel, but we want to do that, and I know you've heard this term, at the speed of safety. Now, when an assessment was performed on the actual facility by the third-party assessor, they gave us some specific items that we actually needed to complete before we could remove the fuel from Red Hill. And it's a little bit less than 50 items that we have to do. Some are repairs, some are things dealing with training, working on spill response things, hiring more people and things like that, which are things that we're doing. But we cannot remove the fuel until we get approval from our regulators that we have met all those requirements. And some of the repairs are actually going to take a little bit longer because we have to get it's a very unique facility, as we all know, and a lot of those parts are going to have to come from off island. So those long lead supply chain items, make no mistake about it, we're using all the authorities that we have within the Navy, but we're also looking at higher authorities from the Department of Defense to help us get what we need here, so we can move the fuel, get the parts here to fix everything to move the fuel out. So I do understand that that's a concern. It's a concern of mine. Where possible and where applicable, we're going to work with, as always, with our regulators, the EPA and the Department of Health, as we find items that we could potentially use to move that timeline, but that's going to have to wait until we can narrow down the timeline and check on the status of parts and other things like that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ernie, so we now know, based on the incident report that was released a few weeks ago, that roughly 5,000 gallons of fuel, it's estimated that 5,000 gallons of fuel entered the aquifer. We also know that as soon as your team found out that there was a spill in November, you turned off 3 wells. Can you talk a little bit about what you would need to see in terms of monitoring and monitor wells to allow for Halawa and Aiea wells to be turned back on?
Thank you, Lehu. I can't tell how many times I've been asked that question because we've turned it off because we know that the aquifer below the Red Hill fuel tanks and nearby is contaminated with fuel. And we saw the evidence back in December where there was fuel in the water development tunnel of their drinking water source called Red Hill Shaft. We know the aquifer was heavily contaminated at that point. And by the way, that lava tube that's 300 feet from the end of that tunnel stopped pumping at the end of November, and it stayed off till the beginning of February. When they finally got the GAC or the GAC units in there so they could flush out Red Hill Shaft and pump the water into Halawa Stream. So that fuel sat in that water development tunnel, and one end of it had a lava tube that was moving water through the aquifer, who knows where. So I just want to make that point of clarification. So what it'll take to be able to turn on Halawa Shaft, Halawa wells, and Aiea wells, we need to have a lot more investigation. Drilling of monitor wells is an obvious, there's a lack of that right now. Most of the work since 2005, when the Navy started installing monitor wells at the Red Hill facility, because they found fuel contamination under 19 of the 20 tanks when they drilled rock cores under those tanks. Those wells have been located on Navy property where the Red Hill facility sits. There's been very little monitor wells in Halawa Valley and also none in Mauna Loa Valley that can look off-site where the groundwater might be moving and transporting fuel contamination off-site. So there would need to be dozens of monitor wells. I remember back in 2014 or 2015, I was asked the question, Oh, Ernie, how many monitor wells do you think are needed to better understand what's happening there? And you know, I just said, I'd like to see 100 monitor wells drilled on either side of that valley, because the more wells we can drill, the more certainty we can have on what's happening deep underground, in the underground aquifer, and what's contained in that aquifer, which might be fuel contamination. So a much more aggressive investigation needs to be done before I can make the decision, the difficult decision to turn on Halawa shaft, Halawa wells, or IA wells. So there are two things that need to happen: the defueling of the facility and also the aggressive investigation into the aquifer on Halawa Valley and also Mauna Loa Valley. That needs to happen before we can move forward to safely turn on our wells. Thank you.
Admiral Barnett, when you say the Navy's intent is to remediate the spill, how do you define that goal? Is it the restoration to the state of pure, clean drinking water we've always had here as a public trust resource? Or is it some other measure of acceptable levels of contaminants as defined by EPA and DOH?
That's a good question, and what I would like to say is it's to have the safe water. That's the important thing. And we're going to work with our regulators for them to, you know, as we share our data, when they tell us that the water is safe, that's a direction that we want to take on that. We work closely with them. Our staffs are meeting weekly. We're sharing our data to show that, and like Ernie said, we do have wells. We're trying to build more of these wells that we can go and open up the aperture to put more wells out, sentinel or monitoring wells, and we're going to still share that data also with our regulators and stakeholders, so we can, you know, let the data take care of us and take care of our water. But we will. My goal, my definition of success here is to protect the people, protect the water, and to protect the environment, sir.
So Kathy, how does this oversight work moving forward? And how will DOH be communicating to the public with respect to the progress?
Thank you for that question. The Department of Health, in my mind, there are two different ways or two parallel paths that we have to take. One is the defueling and decommissioning of the tanks. The other is the recovery of the aquifer. As to the recovery of the aquifer, we would work closely, we're working closely with our stakeholders, Board of Water Supply, Seaworm, on how best to recover the aquifer. As to the defueling, we're waiting really for the defueling plan. We need to have that defueling plan so that we can go forward with defueling. We really want the Navy to feel the same sense of urgency that the Department of Health and the people of Hawaii feel, that we need to get action, not in years, but in months. We need to have this thing done. So, thank you.
I'm going to lob this next one out, and whoever wants to answer can answer. On Tuesday at the legislative hearing, the Navy said that it would take 20 to 40 years for the fuel to be broken down by natural means. What are our options from now until then to actively remove fuel from our aquifer?
That's kind of a loaded question. Are you, so it is recovery of the aquifer, which is how you're going to clean up the aquifer. And so one of the ways is that 20 to 30 years, which is the natural attenuation. In my mind, that's just not acceptable. We need to find a way to clean up our aquifer quickly.
Lehu, if I could add that I'm not assuming that we can clean up the aquifer completely. I think there may be some damages that are beyond recovery. And that is my fear. I hope folks I hope I'm completely wrong, that the fuel hasn't spread and that the aquifer can be easily cleaned up. But I fear that that may not be the case. So right now, like Wayne mentioned, 104 million gallons sits right over our aquifer, 100 feet above it. There's a 27% chance every year that another release between 1,000 to 30,000 gallons can occur. So that threat needs to be removed from being to our aquifer, because our aquifer has been injured. It has been hurt already. We just don't know how badly. And we need to find out how badly and try to address the pain that our aquifer is experiencing right now.
Wayne, you touched on this a little bit at your intro, but I want to come back around to it. You know, safe drinking water is obviously important to everyone in the community, but right now the ball is in the court of the regulators, and decisions are being made at the military level. Going forward, what is the role for members in the community, and how can they engage to not only make sure that this process is handled properly, but to also look at different ways at which, moving forward, we have a voice in the decisions that get made at this level, just like, you know, including building the tanks in the first place?
So, you know, I think it's super important to realize that we've come this far. We've got some major progress made just in this last year, and it's all because people mobilized and people stood up. People understood that it's all our collective kuleana to protect this island and our water, and that kuleana continues, right? I really don't think we can, you know, as much as I, you know, appreciate, you know, that the Navy is finally coming out and engaging with the broader community, it's not clear that they, as an institution, will care about the situation as an urgent crisis, as Director Ho stated. You know, it's up to us to make them care, and there's, you know, so for folks here and for folks watching, you know, absolutely, you know, reach out to the Sierra Club of Hawaii, reach out to Kahoiwai, Water Protectors, CNHA. You know, there's networks that are already are continuing to mobilize and continuing to strategize about how we can make the Navy care, like make them treat this as an emergency, knowing that, you know, they don't necessarily have the connections that we do, right? I mean, you know, Admiral Barnett's predecessor, he was here for less than a year. I don't know who in the Navy leadership is going to be here in 2.5 years, you know, when the Red Hill may or may not be defilled. So, you know, we have to be the ones with connections to this place, with investments, you know, in the health and well-being of ourselves and our future generations to you know, hold their feet to the fire, hold our leaders accountable so that they can hold the Navy's feet to the fire. And yeah, and absolutely, if, you know, talk to your neighbors, talk to your coworkers, let them know that we're not powerless with Red Hill. Like, we're still under existential threat. And you know, absolutely, if you find like 5 people that want to like do something, you know, there's ways that, you know, even small groups of folks can use, you know, what their skills, their powers, do what they enjoy, and at the same time, you know, take action to protect our water. And so yeah, find those people and reach out to the Hawaii Sierra Club, reach out to me. We'll work together. We'll organize and yeah, do our part to resolve this threat.
I just want to say mahalo to the Sierra Club, to Wayne Tanaka and his team there, and also the Oahu Water Protectors, because his community-wide efforts have made the difference here. Ernie Lau by himself, trying to sound the alarm for 8 years didn't work, but everybody together and with the community, it's important. So what's important going forward is that the information on the progress and what we're finding, and also what we're going to be doing, that needs to be communicated to the whole community. it needs to be a very transparent process. Many years ago, I was told to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and I refused. I refuse because I am a public servant. I serve all of you. Those are from Oahu, at least. But this is such a vital issue for our community, perhaps the worst environmental disaster the state of Hawaii has experienced, that the information, the findings, they need to be transparent. The community needs to be kept informed on what's happening actively as we move through this journey that will take a number of years. So that's my 2 cents, Lehu. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you for the questions from the community. I'm going to ask a couple here to mix it up a little bit. Admiral Barnett, the Navy leadership has spoken a lot about how the Navy recognizes that it needs to restore trust with our community. How is the Navy going to do this?
Thank you for that question. And I want to get to the trust question second. I want to bring up a point here that I hear you and I understand. I know there's concern about the constant transfer of senior folks like myself in and out. But what I will tell you is that, and I believe it was Frederick Douglass that said, behind the measurable seen is the immeasurable unseen. Kind of like your staff that you said are behind the scene working hard. My job also is to inoculate them with a culture. The folks that come in, there's the staff that I have working for me, the civilian staff that have been here for years and years, they are the ones that I am leaning on to help me continue pressing for in a couple of years, whenever the Navy says, Steve, you got to go, that's taken care of, that we keep this going and we keep this momentum going. That's what's important to me, and I want you to hear that from me personally. Particularly, I'm a proponent of when senior officers or senior enlisted, and we can open the aperture up later, come here, they need to be briefed. They need to have the training of how beautiful this place is and what's going on. So it's not more, so that's my ode to you, and that's what I'm working on. As I look at the trust item, yes, we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do to earn your trust. It's things like this. It's me coming out and my staff and listening and hearing you. It's being available. It's being transparent. If it was a football game, it's a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. I have to earn your trust. I understand that. My staff understands that. And I'm here to actually be part of that. If there are things that you think that I can do to earn the trust, I need to know that too. I really do. So make no mistake about it. I am here to do that. I'm here to defuel Red Hill. We are committed to that, and we're going to continue on that press, and you have my word on that.
Thank you.
And lastly, if I can tell you one thing, it's about the actions, not about the words. I understand trust comes back when you see things happen and you get those visible. So I understand that.
Kathy.
Yeah, I'd like to speak about the trust and transparency. It's a culture. And so if you can change that culture, trust and transparency will come. One of the things is, now that the commitment has been made to defuel and decommission, do you have to cloud it? Does the tanks and surrounding pipelines have to be clouded by the confidentiality of protection of naval critical infrastructure? If the decision has been made to defuel and decommission, perhaps then you can give out the document so that everybody can see it.
Ma'am, that's a very good point, and I'll take that for action. That's a very good point. I never thought of that. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on that, and it has to do with the uncertainty of the number of previous spills, previous to last May, that has been looming that we don't have a lot of information about. I don't know if I can form this as a question, but there have been roughly 200,000 gallons that have been spilled in different fuel transfers since this facility was being built. And we know that that fuel is looming somewhere between the rock and the aquifer. And as we think about what just a few thousand gallons have done, and we think about remediation, and we think about also removing this fuel storage facility, we have to be cognizant of the 200,000 gallons that are sitting there, and make sure that we're accounting for that and how it is we move forward. Ernie.
Yeah, Lehu and Kathy, thank you. Excellent point on this facility. The issues about Red Hill, it's worldwide, it's international. The facility was declassified in 1995. So Admiral, you know, I echo Kathy's suggestion here, because you can't deal with a problem if you don't have a good idea of what the problem is. So we don't know the full extent of the problem with this facility over its 79-year history because the information hasn't been shared. From the very beginning, when the Navy folks came to visit us at my office and they asked us, what should you do? And this is the engineers, the environmental engineers. Our advice to them was, just come clean. Tell it like it is. Just tell us what the issues are with this facility over its history from the very beginning when it was placed in 1943 in service. How much leaks occurred, where, and where do you think it went? All that information should be made available because that will help to define a clearer picture of what the real problem is. Not just the issues that happened last year, but the 72 other leaks that maybe it's 180,000 gallons documented fuel releases, and there may be other fuel releases that are not documented or shared to us. So that needs to come out. Thank you.
Kathy.
Yeah. I echo the uncertainty of about finding out how much actually was released. But what comes to mind is the investigation report that was recently issued by the Navy. That indicated it was a good, honest assessment of what went wrong. But that also indicated to me that the Department of Health did the right thing in issuing its emergency order and requiring the Navy to shut down, to not operate the facility. Until we can get a good answer about what's out there, we really need to get that information so that we can properly assess what's in the aquifer. Thank you.
Wayne. You know, this came in as a comment to the Admiral, but I want to just reframe it a little bit for all of you on stage. You know, we recognize that moving forward, there is going to have to be unity in figuring out what the steps are and how we keep each other accountable as the regulator, as the military, as the purveyor, as the community. And so I'm going to read this comment because I think it's important to note, I mean, we're here in this live audience, hundreds of people are just enraptured with what you folks have to say, and this goes to Kanaka Maoli being involved in this process moving forward. And so they said, please consider including in a meaningful way Kanaka Maoli in the task force you mentioned. No one knows Hawaii better than Hawaiians. We've been here for thousands of generations and know our natural and cultural resources better than anyone else. It's eminent that we be at the decision-making table in this process.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So folks, so they've opened up a few more minutes for us. And thank you to staff for shuffling a few things around. I know this is a really important issue, so I have a couple of just kind of more granular questions that I had on the plate that I think are important for us to kind of talk through. So Kathy, you know, I read a couple of weeks ago that the Department of Health is trying to reverse engineer the amount of fuel that might have entered the aquifer through some of the data. Can you speak to that? And then what happens if that number that you derive through the research is a vastly different number than what has been stated in the incident report that came out a few weeks ago?
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some answers from the Navy about what actually was released or what's out there. But what we're trying to do is, what data we have, we're trying to figure out what was reported as released, what we're seeing in the heat maps. We're trying to reverse to figure out what is actually, what may actually be in the aquifer. And in that way, we can determine a path forward on how we're best remediate the aquifer.
Thank you. Ernie, I'd like to talk a little bit about the idea of this plume and the fact that it's centered around Red Hill at Current, and that the plume is encased in rock and water, but the water is moving. There's been particle tracking displays that have been theoretically put together. But as the expert, can you help this audience to understand a little better as to what some of your concerns might be about how the plume moves and how does pumping interact with the potential movement of the plume?
Yeah, thank you, Lehu. So just think of the aquifer as it's fresh water in the cracks and crevices of the lava rock below the island. And the water originates up Mauka, where the heaviest rainfall occurs. That water percolates down into that lava rock and then moves by gravity down in the direction of the ocean, from Mauka to Makai usually. But in the area of Red Hill, we think the groundwater might be actually even moving across Halawa Valley, perhaps in the direction westerly to our wells, to Halawa Wells, Halawa Shaft. One of the reasons we turned off Halawa Shaft, which is almost like I use the analogy of a cup of water with 2 straws, or think of it of a sponge fully saturated with water, being the sponge being the lava rock and the water in the sponge, like the water in the aquifer. You suck from one side of the sponge, you can pull water across the aquifer. So if we keep on pumping heavily on one side and the Navy stops pumping on their side, are we going to move or draw and suck that water through the underground aquifer? And also that water might be carrying fuel contaminants. So that's the kind of the simple analogy there. The groundwater is usually never stagnant or never in a place where it's not moving. It's usually moving in some direction. And generally it's Mauka to Makai. But because of the unique issues of the geology in that area, it could be moving more westerly and perhaps even easterly into Mauna Loa Valley. So those are some of the things that need to be fleshed out in the investigation. And that poses, this underground aquifer also is extremely complicated. It's very complex. There are preferential pathways, like the area between different lava flows. The clinker zone is very porous and allows water to flow easily. There's also something called lava tubes, and I talked about that a little earlier. Almost like a pipe in the aquifer where water can move easily. And water will move toward the path of least resistance. So these preferential pathways may move water and contamination much faster than normal conventional thought. And those are the unknowns we're wrestling with right now.
Thank you, Ernie. So we just have a few minutes left. And what I want to do is I want to offer a couple of minutes to each of you to leave us with one final thought about what you would like this audience to remember and engage with moving forward. And we'll start with, since we started last, we went last, we're going to start first with you, Admiral.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to listen. I took a lot of notes, and I know my staff took a lot of notes too. Make no mistake about it, we're going to get it right. I understand we need to be transparent. I also understand, and for my friends here on stage, I look forward to working with you as we get there. I look forward to working, to sharing data, to sharing discussions, and being part of that solution. We will stand by for that. We will do that. We have been doing it, and we will continue to do it. My mind is running a million miles now. There's a lot of things going on. I heard a lot of things, and I felt a lot of things, and I understand. You will see more of me. I will be out and about, and I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you so much.
Can we, on that, can we get an agreement from the four of you to come back if needed at a future date if Kuhio wants to pull folks together to have more community conversations like this? I think this is really productive today.
Got it. I agree. And lastly, I just want to say that we are committed to getting this right. We are committed.
Kathy, what do you want to leave us with?
I just want to leave this with you. On behalf of myself and the Department of Health and Dr. Char, we feel the enormous responsibility to the people of Hawaii to get these tanks defueled and decommissioned. And we also feel that responsibility to protect the aquifer for future generations. Thank you.
Wayne, what do you want to leave us with, Wayne?
So one thing that's become like incredibly clear throughout this whole ordeal is that what's happened here in Oahu, it's not an isolated incident. This is just another example of a long history of practice and policy where communities all across Oceania, all across the continent, have been fighting to protect their water from being contaminated by U.S. military occupation. It's heartbreaking, like think about Okinawa, like Guahan, the Philippines, like Sivukak in Alaska, Vieques. There's communities everywhere that are fighting, and what's really another compelling thing to me is that they're watching us because we've come so far. And so much of it, I think, is because of the organizing, and especially the Kanaka Maoli like groups and coalitions that have been forming and have raising profile and speaking out to on the national and international platforms. And so they're watching us because if we don't win, there's for them, where's the hope? And so even more so, I think, to help draw the line here, it's gonna maybe set the example and give the inspiration for these other people to continue funding, continue protecting water and protecting life, even if they're up against, the biggest, most powerful military institution and the biggest bureaucracy, like honestly, on the planet. So,
Ernie, I saved you for last. And I saved you for last for a reason. Ernie Lau is this unexpected individual who has been ringing the bell for many years now of how important this issue is. And Ernie, if it wasn't for you on December 2nd, almost losing your composure in a press conference, I don't think many people would have realized still how important this issue is. And yeah, please. Ernie has his own hashtag. He didn't even know what that was. And before I let Ernie talk, I'm going to say it's not easy to come up here in front of a group of hundreds of people to engage like this and to have a conversation with the community. So how about a round of applause for everyone here today? And so, Ernie, I'm going to give you the final closing thought, and I want you to tell us what is the most important thing to you when we consider this whole issue.
Kawai ola, ola I kawai. So I leave you with this. There is a challenging path forward, but we can only be successful if we do this together. I mahalo to everybody in this room, from that side of the room all the way across to this side of the room. Every one of you have made a difference on this issue. So mahalo, and please stay on this issue because we have to do this together. And it has to be at all levels of government, from local government, the city or county level, all the way to the state, to the federal level. This is a federal issue that we're dealing with, and it will require all of us in Hawaii working together to resolve this issue and not let this tragedy go uncorrected. Mahalo.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Aloha.